Welcome to the Warband, a World of Warcraft podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Swaglock, and with me today is our other host, Chicken. Chicken, how are you doing?
Hey, what's going on? I'm doing pretty good.
Good, dude. I'm glad to hear that. So, what have you been up to this week?
Well, in terms of actual life, I have been up to a lot and wrapping some stuff up, getting ready for winter, in the States. If you're a good old US of A person, getting ready, getting your house prepped for
I would gamble it's about to be winter for, I think, everybody in the Northern Hemisphere. I think that's how that
fair.
works.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be winter for a lot of people. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, well, yeah, especially northern. Anyways, getting some stuff ready around the house. Again, I just didn't play that much WoW this week.
That's fair, dude. That's fair. I heard you've been keeping up with some news though.
Yeah, we've just been busy. And it's just, I thought about this the other day. WoW just this season just, and we might touch on this more. It just feels like we're already like almost done with the season, and it's not like anything personal. I just feel like I'm just like ready for the next one almost already. Dude, I'm mad selfish right now. I'm telling you.
That makes sense. I mean, that's fair.
You're just not putting out enough content, Blizz. Just kidding. They're putting out way too much content.
They have a lot of content out. Yeah, this week.
Way too much.
Dude, I'm enjoying it though, man. I don't remember if it was, I think it was this week. We went through and did Blackrock Depths, which was, I thought, a lot of fun. That was an enjoyable time. Well, because we attempted it once before, and the first time we did it, it was like rough. And we'll talk about that some more later. We're still working on Heroic Ansarek with our raid prog. That's a rough fight. And I hate to say it. I hate to be this honest, but I'll be this honest. We spent a whole raid night, and we're no further. We're no further on this boss, and that kind of makes me a little nervous. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as well, and I think I was thinking about it during the raid night because I was like, this just doesn't. It feels like harder than FireRack because I don't know. FireRack was, I don't know. Personally, I think FireRack was kind of a dud. Mm-hmm. Like I didn't think FireRack was too hard on Heroic, and what am I thinking? Sekhiroth or whatever his name was. I always say Sekhiroth. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, Farrak though had a fairly easy P1, right? Like phase 1 of Farrak.
Yeah,
now we're talking heroic. We're talking heroic. Phase 1 of Farrak really it wasn't that crazy. There were some healer checks, but if we positioned him in the right spot, everybody kind of did their thing. It was fine. It was fine. The problem is like every hard mechanic on Farrak exists in phase 1 of Ansarek plus more.
Oh, dude, I wouldn't even. I think Queen is like on a different level than FireRock because FireRock didn't really have that many mechanics that dealt with just almost like your whole team just working together. I feel like other than like
phase
phase
2 of Farrak, right?
Yeah, I guess that's fair. But even in phase 2, you had different roles. Like your healers were kind of healing the things. Your DPS were kind of taking care of the ads.
Yeah.
Where like Queen is like, everyone needs to work together. Everyone needs to hit those bubbles, or be in those puddles to jump over the thing. Everyone's got to be in the right groups. Oh my goodness, it's just
so a couple thoughts that I have. Right, like one, and again, this is just looking at like where we're at, what we're having trouble with, but it's an interesting fight. So first thing, keep in mind, if we're comparing to Farrak, right? Like let's remember what Farrak was. Farrak was P1, which was really just around positioning him and kind of just dodging damage stuff for the most part. It wasn't too crazy. That was really easy. Honestly, when we were first dying on P1 of Farrak, I remember being like, how are we even dying during this? Now, there is some AoE damage just going out and stuff like that, but it was pretty easy. Then you get to intermission, and intermission starts to get a little crazier, right? Everybody's got to absorb those balls. There's a lot of damage going up, but we eventually manage to get intermission. Phase 2 of Farak kind of goes hard. Phase 2 of Farak is difficult. Now, I think though, I could be wrong. I could be really wrong about this, but from what I've heard and what I've seen through doing like normal difficulty, is that phase 2 and 3 of Ansarek aren't nearly as difficult from what I've seen as phase 1, whereas Farak I think was the opposite. Farak I think progressively got harder the further into the fight you got, which also meant, right, Farak was like half our fights we were getting him down to 25% health, and so
really.
you had more early end early difficulty stuff for Ansarek and later difficulty stuff for Farak. And so you're getting to the final phase of Farak, and like, yeah, you know what? Half your team dies on phase 3 because the mechanics are hard, but the other half like get him down and you go. Or even during phase 2, right? Let's say phase 2, because phase 3 is just a damage burst, really, and you have that seed mechanic, and that seed mechanic's actually kind of tricky, right? Like, it is mechanically.
Yeah, it was a little harder.
If your group's super coordinated, then yeah. But if your group's not super coordinated or used to having that high level coordination, it's a hard fight. And so I think what's happening is Farak was, because the hard stuff was at the tail end of it, you were getting there more frequently, and once you were getting there, it was you could start losing people and just kind of slide across the finish line and be like, we did it, we made it.
Yeah,
I think the flip is
that's fair.
Is on Ansarek. To me, it seems like the harder mechanics seem to be right off the bat. Now I know there's some stuff with the rift and things you have to pick up in P3 that are going to be tricky and difficult for us. But that means that if we have to make it to P3. I think right now we're getting through P1 and intermission, and by the end of intermission going into P2, we've got like half our group dead, right, every time. And so we're making it there, but half our group's kind of dead already. And so at that point, like, right, you're right. Like, imagine if we were going to Farak P2 with like half our people alive. It's same concept. And I don't think we ever really had that problem in Farak, right? Like, Farak was P2 was when the fight really started, right? P1 was just kind of like, we're noodling, we're just doing some damage, free damage right now. And then you hit P2 and you're like, oh shoot, this is something. And so you are right. I think there is a level of coordination that's required as well. Farak was a little bit more, a little more autonomy as a player. And so, like, on Farak as a player, you could kind of ignore a mechanic and somebody else would take care of it for you, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you weren't excellent at it, somebody else would do it, right? And when I talk about mechanics, I mean, like, healing the ads. Killing the ads, right?
Killing the ads.
Which really, right, like, aren't much mechanics. Moving out of the way of something.
Moving out of...
Honestly, the biggest one for Farak was actually probably making sure to move the ads, right? Move the ads out of the way. And again, then if you messed it up, somebody else probably covered your butt, right? Whereas Ansarek doesn't have that. There's nothing in Ansarek that's like, oh, hey, if you screw this mechanic up, somebody else can still do it. It's like, hey, you screwed this mechanic up.
Be okay.
The group's going to suffer, right? Oh, one person did this wrong. That's an extra stack for, two people did it wrong, right? Like, it quickly starts to stack up. There's a lot of movement issues going on. So they are really, you are right, though. I do think Queen is a harder fight, but I don't know if it's necessarily mechanically harder or if it is the layout of the fight being that it places its harder stuff at the start. So I don't know. It's a fascinating thought.
It's giving me like these Razagath vibes. Yeah, what's up with Blizzard making the first raid of every expansion just like dumb hard? Or is it maybe it's just the gearing, like threshold is so different between expansions that the first raid just feels a lot harder. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I think it is. I think some of it's gearing. I think, right, you're starting from absolute ground zero going into this, and so you need to gear a lot more, whereas we're used to a season to season, so going from one season to another, you're kind of already pretty geared, and then you're just boosting up a little bit more. By the time we're getting to these fights, we were so overgeared on Razagath, and also usually as an expansion goes on, gear gets easier to get. Generally, like as a rule of thumb, it's easier. And so we're getting to Razagath, and we're like, we're pretty strong. We're pretty strong at that point, which definitely feels great. And if I'm being honest, if I'm being honest, Chicken, do you mind if I throw you under the bus just a little bit? Not too much.
Sure, yeah.
Like one toe under the bus.
Oh, dude, that's okay. Yeah, I don't care.
And I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. I said it on the last episode. I think it was the last episode I said it. Mythic Plus right now is the most fun for me I've had in a hot minute, but it's specifically when I've been doing it with like coordinated groups, right? If I'm with a coordinated group, it's so freaking fun. Part of it is because there's so much to handle that like the only way to do it is with coordinated groups. And then when you do it, you just feel so rewarded because you accomplished something huge. And pug groups, pug groups suck. They're so bad right now.
They're not great.
I was in a pug group, and by the way, I've been getting mega picky, like mega picky in my pugs. If it's my key, man, if it's my key, I'm sorry. I'm not. There's no charity. I don't care. I don't care if your main is 2.7k IO.
Oh my goodness.
I don't care, dude. You're 605 eye level. You're not coming to my 8, right? It's what it. Yeah,
even if they had that much
on their on their main, yeah, right. Like I don't like this is that's a whole different character.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I have no guarantee that you know this class, but also too, right? Like a +8 key, somebody coming in at 605 eye level, which by the way, I've got a bunch of those. Like I'm about 2.7k on my main. Bring me along. I'm sure they know the mechanics. Great. But at some point, gear just helps a ton. Like, gear is an insane help, both for raid and for M+. And so when I see that person's like, I'm a 605 priest, can I come? And I'm like, dude, you're literally going to look at things and die. Right? Like, even if you know the mechanics, how are you living? Right? And, so the reason why I bring that up, though, is I recognize that while I'm enjoying M+ right now, and I think M+ is a lot of fun, and I actually like the dungeons. I like the dungeons right now. They're good.
Yeah. No, they're good. I like the dungeon pool.
Yeah. Even though I'm enjoying M+, I know a lot of people aren't. I don't want to say most, because I can't speak for that, but a lot of people aren't. And so I know yourself included in that. And so I know right now, like, right, we were for all, transparency, we were just out at dinner together, hanging out, talking. And you were even like, dude, I haven't even tried to push anything over a 6.
Nope.
And Queen Ansurek, right, is probably a +8 or higher boss, right? Probably +8. Maybe we could say +10, right? Somewhere in that range, 8 to 10 in difficulty. Yeah, absolutely.
Not 10. No way.
Yeah, that 8 to 10 range. Oh, absolutely.
A 10.
All right, want me to put in perspective, dude? I'm timing 8's no problem. Timing 8's no problem. I almost +2'd an 8 yesterday, and the only reason we didn't was because a boss literally glitched out on us. It wasn't even like anything we did. The boss glitched. We had to redo it. We timed it, but we didn't +2 it. Right, and 8s are great because they give out the Gilded Crest, so I can upgrade my hero track gear even more, or my myth track gear if I have some myth track gear. 10s though, I haven't. I'm gonna be honest, for transparency's sake of the pod, I haven't timed any 10s. I've been completing them for Vault, but I haven't really timed them. I haven't made a high effort to time them either. Usually if I have a 10, I'll just grab some friends in the guild and just be like, yo guys, no lever this with me. Let's just get a Vault slot real quick. And like, I'm okay with that. I do want to get my portals. Maybe this next week I might take a couple days off work to relax. I have to use them up before I'm out of time. Maybe then I'll do it. I'm getting distracted. Point being, I do think a lot of our raid team is probably similar to that. And so I do think we're in a spot right now where a lot of people aren't necessarily thrilled to be doing M+ because pugging isn't great, and they don't feel like they can form a group around them. Which, by the way, that is what you have to do. You have to get to know people and be intentional to reach out to them to say, hey, you're great keys. You want to come do this key with me? And because of that, I think we have a lot of people that are going in our raid team, but just in general, I think across the board, outside of our raid team too, I think this is true. Going into heroic Ansurek or heroic raid, heroic court, like anything end of the raid, and they're going, oh, this is really hard, this is really difficult, but they're not doing equally difficult content in M+, and so their gear is actually like suffering pretty tremendously because of that, because like they're basically exclusively gearing through raid at that point. And so we're accustomed to out gearing the boss a little bit, right? We're accustomed to being a little overgeared for that fight. And that kind of helps cover up some of our mistakes because we're a little bit more defensive. Our healers are pumping a bit more. Our DPS are doing a little more. So it just kind of covers up some of our flaws. And so
Yeah,
I do think
fair point.
right now that might be one of our hiccups as a raid team is stepping back and say, okay, we might like need a little bit of that gear handicap, you know? How do we like encourage our team to do more dungeons? Do we jump in with them and say, hey, I'm gonna teach you how to do some eights. I'm gonna bring you to my eights, which means I have to be willing to let my keys, suffer in order to get people in there and get them experience. Do we just say, hey, this is expectation? I don't know, but to some degree, right? Like, if you want to upgrade your heroic gear, you need gilded crests. If you want to upgrade your mythic gear, you need gilded crests. You got to do 8s.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way our team can get gilded crests because they're not getting from delves. They're not getting it from raid.
No.
And if they're not doing 8s, then they're not getting them from M+ either.
No.
I just ranted a ton. I'm sorry.
That's a big difference because even if we want mythic gear this time around, or myth track gear this time around, like you have to do a 10 and it's got to be in the vault, right?
Yep.
So if you want myth track gear, that's the only way to do it, because previous seasons you could do an 8 and you'd get myth track gear, or like an 18, right?
Yep.
But now you can't do that, because I just looked that up because I was like, oh, maybe if I just get an 8 in the vault, like that's fine. And I'll be pretty transparent too. I feel like I probably could do something higher, because
you absolutely could. I know you can.
I've been doing like 5s and 6 and like basically like 3 chesting all of them, and then I just tear my key down because I'm a nerd.
Mm-hmm.
But most of it's just like here and this might appease to like other gamers that are, especially gamers that are parents. I have X amount of time to do keys in a day, or X amount of time to do not even keys, content. Let's say that I have X amount of time to do content in a week. I work. I like spending time with my kid, and to be honest, I would rather probably spend time with my kid than play WoW.
That makes sense.
I need some time to decompress and that kind of thing. And when it comes down to it, I would rather run content that I know I can benefit from, and maybe not benefit from. I'd rather run content that I know that I can at least complete than run something that maybe I can't. Like, and it's not saying me is the problem, but I'm saying like the group is. There's, how many keys have you been in this season that haven't gone well, right?
Oh yeah, plenty. The success rate of keys right now, I think, is lower than ever before. However, what I would argue back if we were debating this, and I love a good debate.
Yeah.
If we were going back and forth on this, what I would say though is that at the end of the day, even if you don't time that 8, getting some gilded crests is probably better for you than runed crests is the level below that.
For the average player, probably yes, but I still have hero track gear that's not fully upgraded.
Yeah, but hero track gear needs gilded crests to upgrade.
I mean, not even upgraded past what you can on what's it called with the
with the rune.
Yeah, the tier 3 crests or whatever you want to call them, like the 3rd level of crests, right?
Yeah, man, dude, I'm looking at your rating right now, right, on Raider.io, because I'm that guy, dude. I don't know about you, but when people queue up for keys, I like okay, what's I don't even know if I can say this. First of all, before I say what I'm about to say, first of all, I'm looking at your Raider.io. You've got like plus, you gotta have a plus like 3 or not +5 that you 3 chested, or +3. Anyways, you have a +5 that you did super well on in Grim Batol, dude. And like Grim Batol, like in my opinion, is one of the worst keys right now. It's probably like one of the hardest keys at the moment. And so dude, if you're +3ing that, and you did it in DPS spec, man. I know you've been tanking a lot because it's easier getting groups, but like, dude, I'm happy to tank, man. If you just want groups to run with, I'd happily pull you into groups.
I've been doing a little bit of both for dungeons. It just basically whatever the flavor is. Like, if I think this one, I sometimes I'll start in a DPS spec just to see who will queue in, and like I'm pretty sure that like 5 there was like a 2700 paladin tank that queued, and I was like, yep, okay, I'll DPS.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, okay, that's easy. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. But
So,
that is like the trick for succeeding keys, right? If you want to
yeah.
do well in keys, you have to run with good groups. And there's a
Yeah, you
couple
do. Oh
ways.
my goodness.
There's a couple ways that you run with good groups. Number one, and this is the number one way you do it. By the way, actually, let's hold off. Oh gosh, because we have a question coming up later. We have a question coming up later about how to find good groups. So why don't I save that? Why don't I save that till we get to the podcast questions segment later in the episode? But one thing I will say though, dude, is if I'm being really honest and really shallow, the thing I was going to admit to it earlier, every once in a while I'll post a higher key in our guild, like in our guild chat in game. And if any of my guildies are listening, I'm really sorry for what I'm about to say. I adore all of you. But you're not going to make me stop. I won't stop doing this. I'm sorry. Sometimes I'll post a higher key. I usually don't. And I usually don't for this very reason. If I have a lower one, if it's like a +4, I'll happily post in there. But if it's like a 9 or 10, I usually won't put it in there. I'll usually personally invite people. Like I'll message them. Because I've posted higher keys in Discord or in the guild chat a couple times. And had people be like, oh, dude, I'll come. Let me come DPS that. And then I'll like pull up like Raider.io and check them real quick. And it's like the best they've done was like a +6. And I had like a 10. And I'm like, now I'm in the really awkward position. Like, it's just weird for me. And I'm sure you feel it where you're like, crap, dude. Now I gotta tell this person no. But I like this person. Like, I actually think they're fun. And I enjoy doing stuff with them. And like, if I had a +7, maybe even a +8, I'd be like, yeah, dude, come along. Let's make it work.
Yeah,
but I just like because when you're forming like that group and like I say higher keys, but we're talking in like the average player range, right? That 8 to 10 range. I'm not talking 13, 14, like 15. Yeah, it's not like when I get in Capo's group and he's like, yo, I got a +16 if you want to run it.
You're like, nope.
Yeah,
nope,
dude,
very much.
He's crazy. We'll get him on the pod one of these days. So yeah, but it just puts you in an awkward position where you're like, hey, I just want to know that you know the mechanics well enough that like we're gonna be good. But anyways, we'll talk more about that in a little bit.
Talk about some other stuff here. We'll get to that. I have a feeling we'll spend a fair amount of time on that kind of stuff. So we could touch on some other stuff. I mean, we can talk about the retuning of BlackRock. I know you guys ran it on Halloween last week. What do you think? That I know they did a ton of tuning to the normal mode.
Yeah, so I do have some thoughts, and I also feel bad because I'm talking a lot today, but I got a lot of thoughts, and I'm enjoying the game.
Okay.
I'm enjoying the game, and I want to talk about it.
I did run it. You know. So I physically cannot talk about it.
Were you with us the first time? Were you with us the first time we attempted it?
No, I wasn't even with you guys the first time. I've yet to run any BlackRock. Okay.
So when BlackRock Depths first came out, we probably talked about it here. Our guild ran it on normal. Most people brought their mains. A lot of people brought alts. But then by the time we got through the first boss, everybody was switching over to their mains. This was normal. And this is a group of players who normally like our heroic rating.
Yep.
But in context, we were struggling on normal. We get to the third boss and we have to stop there. We literally cannot get this third boss down. And we just know it's so painfully obvious that we cannot kill this boss. So we leave, we go with Evs and call it a night, and we go off to our own thing. Major nerfs then come out later for BlackRock Depths. So now we're doing it post nerfs. And I believe from what I understand, the nerfs hit normal the hardest and didn't do too crazy much to heroic.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it was like 30% and 40% damage reductions. So like it was insane nerfs. Like, so I don't know if normal tuning just got all sorts of messed up. I also feel like because there's a quest associated with it for the anniversary event, I feel like Blizzard was like, okay, we need one mode for players to just be able to easily go through in a single sitting and get the quest done and out of the way with their, like if they want to do it with their guild or Pugget or something. And so that's basically what we did. We ran through, did the quest thing. It was fun. Again, we only did normal, but it was cool going through. It was cool having the 10-man option. My one comment on normal, I was listening to, what podcast was it? I was listening to the Potty C, I think it was. And they were talking about BlackRock Depths, and they were trying to figure out, like, they were talking about how there needs to be a harder mode for Blackrock Depths because they just don't like. Otherwise, like, why would people ever do it? And they were talking about gear, right? They're like, why would anybody like? And it was actually fascinating. I love the pod EC. I think they have great content. If they ever want to have me on, I'll come talk. About whatever. I do think the three of them, and for context, the hosts of the pod EC are some of the best WoW players in the world. You have like Maxim.
Yeah,
I don't think a lot of our listeners also listen to them. So I just want to clarify who they are. Yeah, even though right? Maxim, who was the raid leader for Liquid, who won Race the World first this year. You have Dorky, who is one of the best Mythic tanks in the world for Mythic Plus.
Yep.
You have Dratnos, who does a lot of commentary on WoW. He's an excellent player in his own right, but also like just super extremely knowledgeable about the game, right?
Yeah, he's easily another one of those top 1%ers or 0.1%ers, right?
Absolutely. Amazing tank as well. A lot of good tanks. So, but I think because of the way that they play the game, and this will also probably come up later too, as we talk about another one of our topics, but the way they play the game, for them, they're always running the absolute hardest, most difficult content.
Yeah.
And so, but they're also all content creators. And so now I'm a content creator, you're a content creator, but neither of us are playing 8 hours a day every day, right? Like it's not our full-time job to play World of Warcraft or other games. And so it's fascinating hearing them talk because they're like, we don't, the problem is because they think the heroic mode is fun. And I bet it is. I bet when our guild has a chance to go into heroic mode after we've cleared the actual raid on heroic, we'll probably feel it too, right? It'll probably be a blast for us.
Yeah.
The problem is they came to this conclusion that players don't want to do it because there's no gear, and players will only do things for gear. And they're like, it's a shame because the raid's actually fun, and players should just do it because it's fun. And they brainstormed. They were like, oh, maybe if you complete it, it should give you a mythic slot in the vault for completing it, just as a way to incentivize people to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem isn't that players don't want to do things, and this is reality. It's not that players don't want to do things unless they're rewarded for them. Players will do things just because they're fun, easily do something. Yes. I Dragon Ride all day long because it's just fun.
Yeah.
The problem is though, is when you only have, as you said earlier, a limited amount of time to play WoW, right? When we log on, I don't every once in a while I'll have some extra time and I'll do a third raid night during the week, right? We have one coming up this Friday. If you're listening, we're doing a learners raid night. It's a community raid night for our community. So if you want to jump on Discord, you can sign up. Link in the description for more information. So sometimes I'll fit a third raid night in, but I can't commit to a third raid night, right? And our guild hasn't even completed heroic raid yet. So why on earth would we be going into heroic Blackrock Depths when we haven't even completed the actual raid at hand? Yeah. So I think the real issue with Blackrock Depths isn't that the rewards aren't good enough. Although I do think the rewards are kind of crappy, to be honest. The loot kind of sucks. But I think the real problem though is that it just, it dropped so quick, that I was just kind of like,
it is quick.
Yeah, I was kind of like, hey guys, what were we on? Were we on like the fourth boss or something of the raid when Blackrock Depths dropped? And we're like, guys, we have like half this raid to go.
Yeah, dude, we weren't even like close to anything done. And like to that point, like at this point when we get if we get done with heroic raid, we definitely will. Whether it's it'll definitely be in the next coming weeks. I don't think we would automatically move to that. Maybe as like a segue for like a week or two. But like I think the goal is like, hey, let's get ready for Mythic, right? And that's plausible for most guilds that are still grinding for AOTC. Like they're gonna say, hey, why would we? Well, I shouldn't say most guilds.
So here's a good example too, right? And by the way, we might be in this boat ourselves. So just a warning, we might be in our boat ourselves.
No.
Right? Yeah. We had 21 people show up to raid this past week. And I also, it was kind of a weird night. Halloween was the next night. People might have been going out of town to visit family, etc.
Yeah.
So we had 21 people. I don't know if everybody in that group is ready to go into Mythic. Now, granted, if we get Queen down, then they should be good for the first couple bosses for sure. But I also don't know if everybody will want to do that, right? Because we will have higher expectations. We will be placing more on our players in order to heroic raid. People might go, hey, you know what? I'm glad I got AOTC. That's all I wanted. I don't really care to push any further. I'm burned out this season. I'm done. Let's say we
Yep.
lose 3 people, right? Now we're down to 18.
Yeah, 3
And
people.
we're under that mythic threshold. We
Yep.
could, like other mythic guilds, just recruit, but I don't think that's our norm. I don't think our norm for us is to recruit, because then
It's not really.
it's a different culture than what we really are looking for our guild. We recruit, but we don't recruit for the purpose of the raid team. And so that's a different culture than our guild's looking for. And so now we're at 18, right? So I think where it rocks is for those groups of players who are like, hey, our guild just got AOTC. We're so excited. But now that we hit AOTC, a lot of our people want to, like, they're kind of slowing down. They're not as interested in keeping up. Like, some of them aren't even playing. They're off on another game. Awesome. Let's go do Blackrock Depths now, because that's what, 10 to 15.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm. So it has option there. But again, though, it hit so early in the season.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, it was for the anniversary. I think the thing that annoys me, though. I'm sorry, I'm ranting all over the place.
Hey, man, that's who you are. We love you for who you are, man. We'll never change you. Never ask you to change.
We get Blackrock Depths like a month, okay, maybe like 2 months into the first season of the expansion.
I think it was like 2 months. Yeah.
Yeah, in the first season of the expansion. Why couldn't they do this for like season 4? Why couldn't season 4 come along fair. And they're like, hey, we brought back old content as a new raid?
Yeah, you're a big advocate for that, man.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. I just think it's like, like at that point, like most people already checked out of this expansion anyway. Yeah. So,
and I know why Blizzard does it. I actually do understand why Blizzard does it. They do it because they want people who maybe came late to the expansion, to still be able to experience some of that content. So I get that.
And there's other incentives with it, like the bullion system, which is dinar, whatever you want to call it. Like I think that's a good system to like have people say like, hey, like I never got this trinket because I just wasn't lucky enough, and
maybe
BlackRock
has that.
Oh yeah, but see, the thing is, BlackRock trinkets are garbo.
Especially if you need that mastery.
Shouldn't say that. I think. What'd you say?
Especially if you need mastery.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, if you need mastery, they're definitely garbo. I think there's one trinket that's actually usable for blood and frost.
I do think I saw, I could be wrong, I do think I saw a trinket that's good in there, and I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, it's only good because it's like coded wrong or whatever, so it doesn't set the cooldown for your other trinkets.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure one of those trinkets is like busted on Outlaw. Did you see the raid details for this tier's raid on Wowhead for last week?
I did.
Like Outlaw was like what, like 50,000 damage above everything else. Like you basically see like this nice like plot, and then at spot 1 there's just like Outlaws like a good like couple inches ahead of everything else. It's like, oh my goodness,
it was nutty. Yeah, you're looking at it, you're like, okay, this can't be okay.
They're like, this can't be normal. Yeah,
but was that from the Outlaw bug that was going around for a little bit, or is that just unrelated?
I think it was. I don't think it was that trinket. I think it was a separate bug. But man, sometimes Blizzard just needs to fix some bugs.
Yeah. Well, did you hear the reasoning behind the glitches going on in Raid right now?
Wasn't it just because they were like prioritizing BlackRock?
No. So you know how like there's a bunch of like glitches in Raid with like desync issues and things?
Yeah.
So basically Blizzard came out and was like, hey, in the 11.0.5 patch, we were actually trying to ship some like major overhauls to like the game engine.
Oh.
And so they were trying to get the game engine secretly up to date for new stuff coming out in the future. And so they were like, hey, we were updating the game engine, and in the process, it has just like screwed up a bunch of old code that we didn't realize it would cause problems too.
Oh, okay.
And so that they came out, they're like, we're well aware of it. We're trying to fix it. It's a much more complex problem than it appears to be. Because I know they've continually been putting hot fixes out, like slowly chipping away at the problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, they basically said like in high like fights, they just have a lot going on. Let's just say that high volume fights, that there's bound to be like lag moments, which makes sense because if you think when like the major moments are, is like on court when those rings are going out.
Oh yeah,
That's a lot of crap
goodness.
happening at once. Like a
Yeah,
lot
there
of
is a
stuff.
lot of visual.
So it makes sense, right? Or another one, not as frequent, not as common, but on Queen Ansarek when the web blades or whatever it's called go out.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Again, that's a lot of ground crap happening at the same time. Again, not as bad as the rings though, so you don't see it as often. I think it's like 1 in 200 or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think maybe I just heard like the joking portion of like, oh, they had their interns working on it or something.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I think someone joked about that at raid night, and I was just like, oh, is that? I was like, oh, maybe that's true. I don't know.
No, they were actually trying to prepare WoW for the future, and kind of screwed up a little bit. Future.
So yeah, that's kind of neat. So overall, BlackRock is more on track with. I don't want to say like typical like anniversary style content, but it seems like it's getting there.
Normal's pretty easy. It's simple to go through. It's fun. You get to reminisce on old areas and bosses and fights and things to do. From what I understand though, heroic is still pretty dang on par with heroic.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're looking for a challenge, heroic's a challenge.
That does kind of surprise me though, because they did release LFR for BlackRock, so I kind of thought they might leave normal like a little bit more in the typical normal raid
I
area.
assume that was the plan, but for the reason they made a change. But also, I think they overtuned it by accident.
Okay, that's fair. And they're like, we're not going to change it just because it's.
And again, it is technically normal. So like,
yeah.
I mean, we did normal. You and I did normal recently with the community raid night, right? That we had.
Yes. Yeah.
Again, there's another one coming up. You can sign up on Discord. We were burning through bosses, and most of our raid team had never done those fights before.
Oh, dude, and let's talk about like the fact that like I was way under geared. Like,
yeah, dude,
I had no reason of being at that raid.
We got to make sure we get you geared up a little bit more for the next one.
Oh, I'm geared up for this next one.
Perfect. How are you liking Boomkin, by the way?
Yeah, I kind of like Boomkin too. It's fun. It's definitely different. I like the caster role a little bit, but I don't know. I'm still getting kind of used to it. I'm used to just being able to do stuff on the fly, but caster is a little different. So
it is. Boomkins are a little tanky though.
Yeah, they are, and that's the other thing that I just got to get used to is just even switching between the forms, like just switching to bear if I need to be a little more tanky, and doing that kind of stuff.
I was loving people like, oh, what defensive does Druid have? Bear. Bear. Yeah.
Hey, what? Yeah, basically, yeah, bear. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about 1.0.5, but we've in between this podcast and the last, we've actually gotten a lot of information about 11.0.7, which is typically historically like the precursor to season 2 of an expansion, correct? Like it's kind of like we're gonna drop this, and then like in 4 or 6 weeks is when season 2 is gonna drop, right?
So yeah, kind of, right? So in Shadowlands, right, we had 9.0.7, which was their season 4. In Dragonflight, or not 9.0, we had 9.2.7. So the idea is like your third season still has a 0.5 patch and then a 0.7 patch. Did they have a 0.5? Maybe Shadowlands was 0.5. My memory's hazy, but Dragonflight for sure, right, had 10.2.7, right? So it went 10.2.5, which would have been like season 3. Yes. 10.7 was season 4. And the idea is that the 0.7 is like, hey, we're doing another season, but it's not. There's no like new raid, essentially. No new raid, no new zone. However, on the flip side, at the start of Dragonflight, it's actually the opposite. They had 10.0.7, which did not include a new dungeon rotation. It did not include a new season for Mythics or PvP or raiding. However, it did include a new zone, and it did include Yeah, a new zone. I think that's about
Yeah,
it.
it included like that thing and that like that almost like vault like thing that you go in with those keys and do
Yeah,
like
which is pretty
things to get
cool.
like extra loot. Yeah.
The Skara Vault or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's what it was called. Yeah, it was cool for like a couple weeks, but then I was like, okay, this is it's kind
But
of
what was
okay.
interesting though, so a weird similarity, a very weird similarity though, is that in the point 0.7 patch back in Dragonflight, the start of Dragonflight, you got the Annullet, right? Remember that ring?
Oh yeah.
And so now you can get the was it the Circlet? I think Circlet or something like that. And so it's another ring that you can get gems for or something to like
Oh
empower it, make it stronger.
gosh.
Yes, but
Oh great.
two fascinating points. One, the zone that we're going to be in, which is was it like Siren Isle, right?
Yeah.
The zone we're
Mhm.
going to be in was originally supposed to be a BFA zone, not a
Oh
major one,
wow.
just like used for something small for BFA, and then it got scrapped, and so they're just reusing it. So it's assets that they already have.
Oh wow.
But then what's also interesting is the ring is a transmog.
Of
No. It's a transmog. It's the
Wait,
first
what do you
ever
mean?
ring we've ever gotten that has a visual in game.
Oh really?
Yes. So you can
Oh,
actually
that's
like
kind of neat.
see the ring on your finger. I'm gonna drop it in our show notes for you to take a look at. But you
Yeah,
can actually
that's
like
interesting.
see the ring. Is that
Huh?
crazy?
Yeah, I didn't. I was like, wait, what do you mean transmog? Like, I thought you meant like this is gonna sound like really stupid, but I thought it was like almost like you go into like your transmog menu and you equip it through that. And yeah, it would be like major weird, but yeah, that's kind of nutty. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's gonna be
Yeah,
interesting how that works
yeah.
out. It looks like it's gonna be a little bit more stat based than the previous the Annullet was, right? The Annullet wasn't very stat based. This will be a little bit more stat based.
No. Yeah, it was all just like skill
Procs.
based.
Yeah, it was like procs
Yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, like proc based.
I
Yeah.
believe this will
Yeah.
still have some proc options too. I think you kind of get either or. So that way you can just kind of do it all. And it's supposed to be another item that's just like pretty strong and you'll probably take with you into a good portion of the next season.
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty fair. But let's be honest. I don't think anything out of 11.0.7 is gonna bring as much hype as obviously what's coming out with it.
Yes. I know what you want to talk about. I'll let you discuss it.
Yeah. So let's be honest. I think I'm a little biased because I think they base it off of another game that they purchased that I was kind of a big fan of. That in 11.0.7 we have the return of the coveted Plunderstorm, and if you're not familiar with what Plunderstorm is WoW's kind of take on the whole. I'd say it's a new age craze of battle royale style game, and personally, I really like Plunderstorm. I thought it was a really fun game mode. I think there was some tuning that they could have done to it to make it a little more, how do you say, I don't want to say user friendly, but almost like more accepting of people that might not be as good at that style of game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm pretty hyped for it. Like I'll be dead straight that I am pretty hyped for it.
Yeah, I think too what is so fascinating to me about the Plunderstorm return, the new zone for 11.0.7. And by the way, just another throwback because there's so many similarities to the Dragonflight thing. In Dragonflight, we had that. It wasn't really newish. It was just the same island that they had used for the dragon, the Evokers.
Yes.
New character zone, right? It was like the starting zone.
Oh yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it was already content that existed and like had no other purpose, and so they created purpose for it. All of this though that I'm looking at. Last season, the end of Dragonflight, I remember they had Plunderstorm coming out. They had Remix coming out. And just at the time, just being like, wow, Blizzard's doing so much, and they were tuning every 0.5 patch was major tuning. They released a stinking new spec in the middle of a season, right, in a 0.5 patch. There's just so many things that were happening. And for whatever reason, in my mind, I was like, okay, when we get to the next expansion, that's going to slow down. Especially, maybe not the tuning stuff, but especially all the other big things. And you know, even in my mind, I thought tuning would slow down a little bit. But all the big things like the plunger storms and the remixes, that in my mind, that's just for season 4, just to hold people over so nobody gets too grouchy and gives them something to do.
Yeah.
And yet here's Blizzard, like, pumping content, pumping so much stuff for us to do. And so, like, it's funny, like, when we talk and we're like, oh, there's nothing to do in the game. And yet there's, like, an event bigger than any event we've ever seen in WoW in terms of, like, a holiday event, right? Like the scale of this anniversary event, I don't think there's any holiday event in WoW that takes place at this scale. And, like, actually has, like, enjoyable stuff to do, right? So that's huge. Then you also have a new zone coming out with stuff to do. You have a new item that requires you to farm things for. You have dungeons and raids still going on, and you have delves now. Delves are a thing for people who like to do delves. Although I don't know if anybody's really still doing delves. If you're a newer player and you listen to the podcast and you try to find a way to get gear, delves are a great way to get gear. Up to a point, up to that like 616 point. But yeah, there's just so much to do.
Yeah, you know, I think they're trying to justify, you know, hey, you know, everyone's spending $90 on this mount. You know, that's a lot of money in our pockets. We got to start pumping out content, or people are going to start questioning, hey, you know, what's going on? Wow, we're paying you a ton of money and you're not giving us that content, you know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure that Brutosaur mount cost them the millions of dollars that they made from it. I'm pretty sure they probably lost money making that mount. Right? Like
Stop.
There's no way. There's no way they made money on that.
Don't even. That's hypocrisy, man.
I'm just trolling.
Oh my goodness. The fact that I just read on Wowhead again that they're like, hey, the economy's finally back to where it was pre Brontosaurus mount. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like they're talking about the economy of WoW, like similar to like, you know, post Brontosaurus, like post COVID. Like I'm like, oh my goodness, like the Brontosaurus mount just changed the game, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean,
anyways,
it's a fair observation.
Oh, it definitely. I think it did. I think it did change the game, but I mean, we talked about that a lot last week. So if you want to hear more about it, you know, tune into last week's podcast, episode 8, and with this, you know, we got a little bit of extra tuning. We got some race tuning. I know you said you were a little up to date on that. You know, we talked about race too, and just how, you know, different people look at races and you know, hey, when you choose a spec, and I know you personally will probably, I think I know your answer to it, and my answer is probably the same as your answer. Like, you don't ever choose, like, say you're starting a new character, you don't ever choose a race based on what that race will do for your gameplay, correct?
Very minimally.
Okay.
And I can explain. I do think about it. I actually do, like, it does cross my mind. It's not absent, but a lot of the time it crosses my mind as part of the feel of that character, right?
Okay.
So if I'm making a Void Elf, I'm thinking like, oh, how can I like use the Rift on Void Elf? Like, what's a cool way for me to pull that off? Or those type of things, right? Like, I'm thinking about that. Or like if I'm making a Worgen, I'm like, oh, dude, I'll be able to have like an extra speed boost on my Worgen. That'll be awesome. Like, this character's gonna be slow, but the Worgen's gonna make it faster. It's very secondary. It's very, very secondary to me. But it's something I think about. Yeah. But I was listening to, again, the Pod EC, which, great podcast. I feel like I'm throwing them under the bus today. Great podcast. I just think they have a very specific perspective based upon the way that they play the game that doesn't really line up with the perspective that you and I have based upon the way we play the game and the people that we play with. And their argument on their podcast was, that racials should just be removed altogether and maybe be added in as talents on like an extra talent tree that you can just choose which racials you want. Maybe at the bottom of your talent tree, kind of like PvP slots, you just pick the racials you want. But that kind of defeats the purpose. At that point, why have any, right? Like, just get rid of all of it.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense. It's like, oh, yeah, my blood elf has stone form. And you're like, but why? Why does it have stone form? It's like, it just does. But that is, I think that's part of the conversation is it's really hard. I think people forget that WoW is an MMORPG, right? And so they'll I think most people get into WoW for the RPG element. There's something fun about creating this character and exploring this world. But eventually, like you and I, you end up more in that MMO category than the RPG, and you're just like spamming dungeons all day and running raid, and that's what keeps you around, and that's what I love. I love doing that. But what I think though, and the reason why this is such a fascinating thing, and we are going to talk about the racial changes, but you brought kind of this topic up, and I'm heated on it, so I'm talking about it. What's fascinating to me though is when I hear players go, "Oh, we should just remove racials because I hate having to pick my race based upon which racial's the best." And my answer is like, okay, why should Blizzard change the whole game because of a choice you made for yourself? Like, nobody's putting a gun to your head going like, you have to play this race because of this racial. No, you yourself are going like, I need that 1% boost in order to like get better. And I get it. I get that Shadow Meld and Stone Form can be pretty busted. Yeah. Right? Like, if I really wanted to, I should probably make our whole race swap to gnomes for Ansurek just to get out of the snare or the root, right? The root. So you could probably joke about that, but the reality is like, right? I think there's this question of like, do high end players, right, which are oftentimes some of the loudest voices in WoW because they're the ones with the biggest followings. They're the ones who, are the most impressive in what they achieve. Do their desires sometimes maybe neuter the RPG elements of WoW?
I would say yes. And to that point that you just made of like, hey, at the end of the day, it's you're the one making the decision. Like, you either have to sacrifice literally pure cosmetic and how your character looks, like like a night elf or versus a gnome, like gnomes, a little short, cuddly, cute little character versus someone that's basically taller and looks like an elf. Versus do you want a solid gameplay? Well, not even solid gameplay. Do you want to be able to have like a step above someone, right? Yeah. Because of the racial you have. And maybe not even a step above someone. It's more of just like an advantage, really. I don't think there's any racials that are like, oh, this racial gives you like more DPS, right?
Yeah, well, there are racials that give you more DPS, but they're minimal. They're so minimal that nobody's making their choices based upon those. For the most part. Yeah, I think the problem is it's like Mythic Plus, right? Stone Form for dwarves, right? It's like, oh, dude, don't you want a free extra like defensive? Like, don't you want to be able to get rid of like these things? Take Stone Form. Shadow Meld's another great one. I have Shadow Meld, but I play tank, so it doesn't make any sense. I never use it. But right, Shadow Meld's another one where it's like, oh no, I Shadow Melded, so I'm not being targeted by this thing anymore, or I was able to end up using the mechanic because of it. So or I have aggro Shadow Meld, right? So there are some that I think maybe are abused in Mythic Plus. If Blizz came back and was like, hey, we just took out racials for M+, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's kind of lame, but whatever. I think my problem, and you kind of hit the nail on the head when you're talking about like appearance and everything. My problem is like, don't ruin everybody else's experience just because you want to have a better looking transmog, right? Yeah. That you're grumpy because you chose to play a dwarf, even though you hate how dwarves look. You chose to play a dwarf because the racial mattered more. Okay. Yeah. Right. And I chose not to play a dwarf because the appearance mattered more. Or actually, like in some cases, but I like there. I think WoW can hit a point where it becomes so homogenous, right? And I think you probably see it where it's like every class needs to have one of these. Every healer needs to have one of these. Every tank needs to have one of these. And you're just like, wait a second. what if you just made everybody the same?
Yeah, it just
Like, what if by default everybody's just a human arms warrior, and that's it? And there's no talent trees. You just get the same talents, right? Like, at what point? At what point are you like happy, right?
Yeah, never.
But I'm ranting about that. Here are the actual changes. So for the most part, nothing really got nerfed. So you're not seeing like Stoneform getting nerfed or Shadowmeld getting affected. It's just all buffs. It seems to be buffs. Blizzard's just saying, hey, these things feel a little weak. As time's gone on, we've just realized these need to be a little bit stronger. Like Gift of Naru is down to 2 minutes on cooldown versus 3 minutes on cooldown. High Mountain Torns, the Rugged Tenacity is increased by 50%. I think that's just defense, like all around defensive ability. Lightforged Draenei, Light's Judgment does more damage and it's a wider area, but it's capped. What's interesting, they had a Holy Resistance for a while, but resistances aren't really like, nobody cares about them anymore. And so they did change Holy Resistance to Holy Providence, and so now increases your healing done by 1%. So that's not bad. That's not terrible. Which is fascinating, right? Because then you kind of get to go back and forth. Like, do I want that just passive 1% extra healing on Lightforged, or do I want that Gift of Naru, which is a whole extra clicky on the Draenei?
Oh my gosh!
Right, Nightborns do a little more damage on their Arcane. So all sorts of things. One of the bigger ones I saw that was interesting and made my brain start thinking is that Void Elf Spatial Rift movement speed is increased by 80%, so the rift will move faster when you shoot it out, and it will move even further. And I think it's increased to 8-second duration versus 6-second. So all to say that their rift could become significantly more usable in content, where you're like, I know this is going to happen. I'm going to shoot a rift over here and then jump in a second to avoid something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe get that last spell off, and then I think if you're creative, you could pull off some really cool stuff with it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think at the end of the day, races are a cool way to kind of change gameplay, and I think there are definitely. I mean, people will tell you all the time there are races that are better than others, but you know, I think personally, you know, in especially in the content we push, you know. And you know, we keep saying that, you know, like these guys and some of these other podcasts, it's basically like talking basketball with Michael Jordan, right? Like he's on such a different scale of like, you know, I'm playing backyard basketball with my son, and you know, these are like professional athletes, you know, versus, you know, what we're talking about. Like we're pretty standard gamers, you know, not doing anything crazy, and these guys are like the top of the top, and wow. And like, you know, if that's you, you know, hey, pick a racial that aligns with those. If that's not you, you know, pick one that you like. I like gnomes; they look kind of cool, so I picked a gnome. You know, and, I'm sure you are similar.
Yeah, right.
No.
Again, I made a joke, right? Like I have Shadowmeld, but I play tank, so really, if I really like, maybe I could have gone with a dwarf instead, but I just I like the look of my character, and by the way, I like Shadowmeld because it feels in line with being a night elf. There's just something that like. I still want the RPG element of the character. I still want to kind of become the character a little bit. I'm not role playing, but I still want it to, you know, there's a world that exists, and all these small things that sometimes are irritating. I'll be honest, sometimes the small things are irritating, but all of them add up to create a really beautiful world.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, hey, let's shift gears a little bit, and we'll maybe skip some stuff for a future podcast, because I really want to talk about. I see
what you're looking at skipping. Didn't we say we were definitely talking about that this week though? Like last episode, we were like, oh yeah, we're gonna get to this next week. So I don't know if we can skip it. I don't know if we can skip this one. We told everybody we'd talk about it.
I do want to talk about it, but I'd like to keep us under time, and hey, maybe this is a good way of getting people involved and talking. You know, we've always talked about, you know, getting, you know, what time works perfect. You know, typically we try to stick to like hour 15. You know, that kind of stuff, and you know, we've made some longer ones.
What did we do last week? Last week was like hour 40. Sorry, everybody. Hopefully, y'all's okay. If you guys hated it, just let us know.
Yeah, and we can stick with that kind of stuff, but I know if we talk about this next topic, we'll definitely be in that realm, and it's up to you. I mean, I'm okay with either.
Yeah. I
Because
think I don't think I could. To be honest with you, I'm pretty quick at at this next topic, so you might do more talking than me. To be honest.
oh, you think? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we can talk
Let's
about it
hit it.
then.
Let's hit it.
Okay. So we got one of my hot
And
takes,
by the way, I
and
think before you say, it, I think if you find this conversation interesting, leave comments, and we might bring it up again next week and go further if people have opposing views to what Chicken and I say.
No, and I think we have some more stuff to talk about later, and I think one of that branched off of a hot take that I think you actually brought up, a couple weeks ago that we were talking about, and we have some viewer discussion about that we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, so this last hot take that I think we mentioned last podcast, and maybe even the one before that, was about WoW being a free to play game, and will WoW ever be free to play, and will we still pay for expansions, which the model that I would propose would, WoW is no longer subscription based, and you basically pay for expansions at that point. And I compare it very much to, like, if you're into sports games, like a Madden almost, like basically it's the same game almost every single year. You're just paying for an updated roster at that point. Like, hey, Tom Brady now plays for the, LA Dodgers and Madden 3000, right? And you want him on that team, so you're going to buy the new game. And that's basically what I think WoW would turn into if it ever became free to play. And I think there's a couple of things to think about, but I want your initial thoughts on if WoW ever became free to play. And maybe we lump it in, because I know we've also talked about this, now that Activision owns Blizzard, do you ever think it'll be part of? Oh yeah, sorry, Microsoft.
No, Blizzard. Yeah. If anything, Blizzard's splitting away from Activision.
Yeah, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
But now that Microsoft owns Blizzard, is there ever like a way that you see it being involved in like a Microsoft Game Pass kind of deal,
Yeah, so I think my initial thoughts, Game Pass is one that I've heard come up a lot ever since Microsoft buyout.
Yeah.
If it happened, it wouldn't shock me. Like, I don't think I'd be shocked. But if you were to ask me, I'd say, no, it's not happening. Right? If Blizzard's making $15 a month off just WoW subs, like, what possible incentive is there to put it onto the Game Pass, if that makes sense? Because
there's not much.
You'll get. By the way, you'll get a lot of players who are like, oh, now I need to get the Game Pass. But I bet you a lot of WoW players already have the Game Pass, so I don't think they're they're not making money. And the Game Pass isn't more expensive than the sub, right? If anything, it might be cheaper. I'd have to look into it. So you're not. I
think it is a little bit. Yeah.
So you're not really, they're not, I don't know, there's no financial incentive for them to do that. The free thing is tough. I think there's a few things that go on. The first one, and not the most important, but it is important to remember, the first one is the subscription cost does help protect us from gold, or not gold sellers, but just like any type of botting, right? Any type of botting, any type of hacking.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It does protect from that to an extent. Obviously, still a problem in the game, for sure. It does help out a little bit. Again, though, is that enough for me to spend $15 a month? Definitely not. The real question, though, and it comes to what we just talked about, is all that content that we've got coming out right now. Constant stuff, constant patches, constant fixes to things. What happens when WoW is just a single purchase game? You purchase the game, it comes out. Do you have to buy every season?
Right?
Yeah, every time a new season comes out. Are there no more 0.5 patches? Right? Do they just go, nope, no more 0.5 patches, no more 0.7 patches? Like, you buy seasons. When that season runs out, you just got to wait till the next season. We're not like, right? So at what point do they stop keeping content fresh and involved? So that, I think that for me is, I think, the deal breaker for the there's just no financial incentive for them to move away from the subscription model. And even if they did move away from the subscription model, I think we as players are the ones who lose.
Yeah, no, I do agree with everything you're saying. And I think, honestly, the only thing that is a bit, and and I go back and forth on this as well. The only thing that I think is a bit drawback from the free, where I think they might advantage from free to play versus not free to play, is on the new player, right?
Oh, I agree. By the way, yeah.
And you can level to 20, and that's fine. That's fine and dandy. But let's be honest, leveling is like such a minor aspect of this game once you get
nobody's
really
playing
into
Tutorial
it.
Island and going like, "This is the game I need to spend money on," right? Like,
yeah, right. Like I think, and maybe that's what they need to work on. Maybe they need to make a more inclusive experience for the air quotes free to play aspect of the current game, right?
Oh, absolutely. We'll even think like, I don't know if you remember, but like when WoW came out, everybody had their own subscription based online game, right?
Oh yeah,
you had those
goodness.
like 2D almost Flash type games. Adventure Quest, was that what it was called? Right,
yeah.
that had subscriptions. I remember there was like some Pirates of the Caribbean MMO RPG thing.
Yeah,
that had a sub
RuneScape
that I was trying to get
big.
into. RuneScape was big. I don't know if RuneScape had a sub, but there were paid options for sure.
There was, yeah. I mean, to be like, I don't want to say to be good at it, but like to make it so you didn't have to grind like 40 hours a week basically to be good at the game. Like you basically would pay.
Yeah. So everybody kind of had something. So it was a product of its era. The thing though that concerns me is now the expansion costs have gone up, right? So when you buy the expansions, the costs have gone up. Now they're really incentivizing more expensive versions of them. Obviously, you have like collector's editions that only like an idiot would ever buy.
Oh my gosh!
I bought one.
This guy.
So those are more expensive, but somehow, listen, it's an election season right now in our country.
Oh,
and listen, there's a lot of issues in our country, and inflation is a big deal. But somehow the WoW sub has been inflation proof for as long as the game's been around.
That's fair.
If WoW went free to play, the only reason they would do that is because Blizzard found a better way to make money.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that scares me more, right? Like, what does that mean? Does it mean more Brutosaur mounts? Like more $90 mounts? More $50 mounts?
Yeah.
What is their way to recoup that cost?
Yeah, because right now there really isn't that much paid content outside of like your subscription and like really there's not like, oh, this mount that I just like have to have. I mean, okay, I'm memeing a little bit because like of this mount, but like really outside of the Bronchosaurus or Brutosaurus, whatever it is, what other mounts has there been in the store, like toys or pets or whatever that you've been like, oh, like I absolutely need this, right? There hasn't been.
Yeah, and think about it too, right? Like if you were to, and then we'll move on to some of the other topics. But if you were to, let's say Blizzard has WoW has 2 million players active, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is right now. I don't know what the number is. I'm throwing 2 million out there, right? That becomes $30 million a month.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Where do they get 30 million? Like, if you lose that, where do you make that up at? Like, where does that come from? So yeah, I don't. But yeah, again though, like, is it possible? Sure. Does the idea of it kind of scare me about the ramifications? Yeah, that too, right? I think for me, maybe I've played WoW so long that I just don't even think about the cost anymore. Which is probably not a great thing, to be honest. But I think part of it too, right, is like, man, I pay $15 a month and I play this game all the time, right? Like I play WoW more than I watch Netflix, Crunchyroll probably for me more than Netflix.
Oh my goodness.
I just canceled my Netflix a couple weeks ago because I started watching something on Hulu. So I usually keep Crunchyroll and then like one other service, and I'll just rotate depending on what I'm watching that month. And so,
that's fair. I mean,
right? So, like, I'm paying about what I pay for any other subscription service, except I use it way more, and I make content about it, and I love talking about it. Now, granted, so I'm not the norm, but that's an interesting one, right? The other conversation, and we don't have to talk about it here. I don't know if we've talked about that past episode. It'd be interesting though to talk about on an episode. Maybe we'll talk about one day. but we're not going to talk about it. I just want to tease it a little bit for future conversation. Maybe get some people commenting their thoughts on this. Actually, in fact, do it. If you have any thoughts on what I'm about to say, comment them, because we can kind of compile that for a future episode. But what if WoW came to consoles? I'm kind of opposed to it, and I got some interesting reasons why, but I definitely would love to hear maybe what our listeners' initial thoughts are to that before I rant.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, I think at some point, to be honest, I think WoW is going to come to consoles, and you kind of said something there that made me think even more, and I do think we'll end up talking about this again at some point, but you just said 2 million active players, which I don't think there's 2 million. Well, no, I think there is.
It's more. I think it's more, by the way.
Well, see, that makes it even worse. $30 million a month. Where's that $30 million going? I know they have a fair amount of staff, and we're obviously getting a lot of content right now. And it's really just is that $30 million going, to the right place? And I mean, no one's questioned it thus far, so maybe I shouldn't, right? But it is something to just kind of scratch your head and be like, that is a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but it's also an amount of money that ain't changed, and
yeah, and it hasn't. Yeah, you're right. It hasn't changed, and maybe we should just be happy with what we get.
Yeah, right. And then because all of a sudden, next year it's hey, WoW subs go up to $20. I might have to be hey. Now, granted, I'm sure. Weirdly enough, right, as technology has improved, I'm sure though some of the costs of running WoW have actually probably gone down. So there's an interesting probably dynamic there. But no, dude, I actually and we'll talk about it in the future, but I don't think WoW will ever come to console. And if I think it does, I think it has major hurdles that it has to overcome. That if it doesn't overcome, I think players who play WoW on console will absolutely hate the game.
Yeah, I personally think it will, and we can talk. Maybe that'll be our next hot take. Talking about that, because I personally think it will, and there's a couple reasons why I think it will, and it kind of strikes with maybe a couple different communities that just don't have access to it right now.
You gotta hold it. You gotta hold it for another future episode, because I think we got some listener questions and comments that we wanted to go through. Right? Yeah.
To preface this, I'm not gonna lie, we can talk a little bit about this. We did hit a kind of a little bit of a milestone with the podcast, and I don't know about you, man. I look forward to doing this most weeks. I got stuff to talk about, and the fact that people are enjoying it, they're sending in feedback, sending in little questions that they want us to answer. That makes you feel good, man.
Yeah.
It kind of hits you right in the heart, get your blood boiling, makes you feel good,
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've been hyped, right? We hit 1,000 downloads. I think that's 1,000 plays or something this week total. So total, which is kind of, we haven't, next week is episode 10. We're bringing in a special guest next week. We're trying to do guests and friends every 5 episodes. So we had Overbug on a few episodes ago. We have a guest next week that you'll definitely want to check out. But it's been a fun journey so far with the podcast.
Yeah, it's been enjoyable, and it seems like people enjoy it. So yeah, let's talk about these. So we got 2 questions, and then we actually have our very first fan mail, which is more it in my mind. Hey, I just want to say this person is dedicated, because I'm not gonna lie, I couldn't even figure out how to send fan mail into our database. I know you had sent a proxy one of hey, this is a test, and I was like, oh hey, how did you do that? And I tried to figure it out, and I spent 10 minutes, and I was okay,
whatever. I got you. It's actually pretty simple. It's actually
okay.
It's pretty simple. If you go into, I just know for Spotify, because that's where I check everything, because I use Spotify.
Oh, okay.
But it should be for just about every location that you listen to.
Okay.
I'm sure it works for Apple as well, where most of our listeners are on Apple. But if you just go into the description, you'll see something that says "Send us a text." It shows up on our end called fan mail. That's what the system calls it. But it just says "Send us a text," and if you click it, it'll let you text a number. On Only thing I'll add, so our next comment is coming from that. Only thing I'll add, and by the way, do it if you want to text in a comment or something. We'd love to talk about it on the podcast. We do check those. Only thing I'll say is the only information about you that it gives us, I think, is locationally kind of where it comes from, like what state, and like the last 4 digits of your phone number. So we don't really see any information besides that. So it does protect your privacy. So what I would ask, because when I'm responding to things, I would love to know who I'm responding to, because I want to give you credit. I want to shout your name out on the podcast. So if you want to put your player name in that message, say, hey, message, like just at the end, just sign off with your character's name or whatever Discord name you use, or your general online username, whatever you want to go by. It doesn't matter. Just sign off, and that way we can give you a little credit for your question. Yeah,
no, that's a good idea.
But I think.
Do you want to go over the fan mail, or
let's do the fan mail
do you
first?
Personally want to read it?
I'll let you read the fan mail, because I think I might talk about it a lot. This is the topic I like, and I thought more about it since the last time we talked.
Yeah. Wait, so you want me to read it?
Yeah, I'll let you read it.
Okay, so I'll read it here. So this came from someone from Virginia, the state, and it says, "Hey guys, love the pod. First of all, thank you. Last show, and this was, I think, episode 7, we talked about LFR. I wanted to give you a perspective from a casual solo player. I'm assuming this means experience past. Well, are you sure that means experience or expansions past?
Oh, maybe expansions past. I don't know.
So either experience or expansions in the past. Basically, in the past, this person would do LFR to see endgame content that I normally couldn't see, and maybe get loot from eye levels. But that's about it. I feel as a casual player, I can't do raids for the point of not being able to put time in for learning mechanics and doing the raid schedule that it deserves to have. Now with delves, the point of doing LFR for item eye level is non-existent for me. So only reason I do LFR is to see the content. So story mode would be great. I understand what Chicken is saying about learning strats, but really, how much strats are you learning in LFR? Keep up the good content and happy gaming. And just for a little bit of context, story mode refers to, we were talking about a follower-esque style LFR, if you will.
They kind of have something called story mode for the final boss right now of the current raid.
Wait, say that again?
They do have what's called story mode for the final boss of the current raid. That's why I called it story mode, because that was the language.
They do?
That's the language that they're using currently.
Oh, I didn't know they had that.
It's just one boss. It's just one boss.
Oh, what is it?
That's for Queen Ansarek.
Yeah, how do you access it?
I don't know. I actually don't know.
Okay.
So well, I thought more though about story mode, because my big thing is that I just don't think LFR is an enjoyable experience for anybody, if that makes sense. It feels like no matter who you are, LFR is a chore. Raiding should be this thing that you look at and you're like, wow, that's so cool. I want to do raiding. I want to be a part of that. And when you go into LFR, yeah, you're surrounded by other players, but none of them want to help you. All of them are toxic. Not all of them are toxic. That's an exaggeration. But, right, there's a lot of toxicity in the chat, just trashing each other, calling out every mistake people make, and publicly shaming over the simplest things, while simultaneously nobody is doing any mechanics whatsoever, right? So everybody's ignoring everything, yelling at each other. It's just a mess. So my proposal that we had on the pod previously was that we have some sort of follower mode, story mode for raid, that you went in and there was like a NPC raid team that you raided with. And as I thought about it, I thought more about it since then. I was like, yeah, like you could actually build that out pretty cool, right? Like imagine the idea, like you go into this LFR raid, and maybe it's sectioned off so you don't feel like you have to commit to the whole thing in one sitting, right? Or wherever you leave off is where you come back in the next time you start, right? They just start right there waiting for you. And when you get to the boss, a bunch of speech bubbles appear above, like maybe different people's heads, or maybe you have like a raid leader NPC and you click it and he walks you through the mechanics. Maybe there's some voice lines to go through the core mechanics when you click on the NPC. That'll do like the core mechanics, and maybe even just like mark things on the ground, right? Like put the markers down as a normal raid leader would do. and then you go into the fight and you have to do your mechanics. You're not dependent on anybody else doing their mechanics, right? The NPCs always execute their mechanics just fine. You do your mechanics, and if you mess up your mechanic, then it's a wipe, right? Oh, you died, that's a wipe, right? And that way, then and then they res you back up or something. And at the end of it, it's like, hey, we're so glad you're able to do this with us. Why don't you sign up now? Here's how you can sign up to find a raid team, right? Or join a normal raid. You want something that at the end of it, people are like, oh, I definitely want to do the real thing now. I definitely want to move on. I just don't know if anybody leaves LFR going like, that was awesome. I want to do the next level of this, right? Like, they're just kind of like, oh,
No, they definitely don't.
This was crappy. I don't want to do this, but harder, right? Like, I don't. And so that's I think my proposal is like, I just don't think LFR helps anybody. So I would say we get rid of LFR. We create some sort of like story mode-esque follower mode for dungeons that teaches mechanics, basic mechanics of raid, and then right, like encourages that player to step up into the next level of difficulty.
Yeah, so funny enough, I've actually thought a fair amount about this too. And what I think, what I'm proposing is basically what you just said, but basically like a hybrid model of what exists now and what you just said. So my thought is we still have an actual LFR group. You still queue in with a raid, and maybe it's not just all, maybe it's not all real people, and I'm actually just thought of this right now. Maybe it's not all real people. Maybe it's half NPCs, half real people.
Yeah.
Just because the other thing about LFR that really sucks is the queue time. Like, no one wants to sit in queue for 15 minutes. Like, no one wants to do that. So maybe after like a certain amount of time, they just throw in a bunch of NPCs to end the queue. I do think there does need to be human interaction, because I know that people can be a little more toxic and stuff, but like I can tell you right now, if you're doing any content with people, you're going to run into toxic groups. That's inevitable.
I agree. Like, I just don't know if LFR though has any like redeeming characteristic to it. I just don't know if there's like anything about LFR other than like, oh well, it gives you a chance to see raid. But then my option gives you a chance to see raid. So
and I do agree with that, and I think there are things, hey, and the other thing is, having a whole NPC raid, you brought up the point of, hey, if someone die, or if you die, then the group wipes. And in follower dungeons, that makes sense, because if one person dies in a dungeon and it's like a key, especially if it's a key role, typically it's a wipe. If someone dies in a raid, especially a DPS, you're rarely ever going to wipe, right? So that is the one aspect where I'm like, when it's all NPCs, that is kind of where I shy away. So
but at the same time, right? Nobody's upset at you because it's all NPCs. So you screw up, there's nobody looking at you screw up. And I mean, obviously the mechanics would be simplified, and like you could even like have it in like a smart feature where maybe the mechanic that you die from, like whoever the raid leader is, like has a voice line that goes, "Oh, here's how you handle that."
Yeah. See, I do think that is needed though, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like that's my big point. Like I think in my concept, you still have actual people, or half NPCs, half people, real life players, but it has to have some kind of like DBM or big wigs aspect. And I thought like, hey, like if you're Alliance, you have Anduin that comes up and says, hey, like these webs are going out, run in the opposite direction of the boss to make sure you don't get pulled off. Like, and like it has to have call outs. Like there's no like LFR, like there's no reason that an LFR or something like that shouldn't, right?
Yep.
It needs to have a learner mechanic. That way people can learn, like, and whether it's like call outs, like a simple call out, like, hey, this is a group soak, stand next to your fellow raiders, right? Or it's Anduin or someone, that an NPC that you're raiding with. I do think that aspect, I do agree with you in that, but I don't know. I just can't get away from the just playing with other humans. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
weird.
I think I just need to be convinced that there's like a win to playing with those other humans, and not just like, hey, we're all queuing up because we need a quick kill on this boss. If you don't know it, I'm trash talking you, right? Like,
yeah,
all right,
yeah. I mean, I don't know if I have like a supreme like, oh, this is like 100% going to convince you, but like I just don't think there's a benefit of, personally, like I'm on the other side of the fence. Like I don't think there's a benefit of just having NPCs.
Yeah, I think the NPC option. By the way, though, I'm like almost never an NPC guy. I almost never think the fix is to put NPCs in groups.
Yeah.
I just think in this one case, if you want something to meet the player needs of LFR, I'd be fine if you got rid of LFR and didn't put anything in. I'd be like, okay, cool, whatevs. LFR's trash. But if you have to have something, right, I think a tool that incentivizes players to then go and find the real deal, right? I want them to come and be like, oh, I can do this. I figured these mechanics out. Yeah. Let me go find a real group now and do this. I think that, like, that to me is the win. The win is like, hey, we're actually training people on how to raid and then sending them off to raid groups.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we both agree of like there needs to be some kind of like basically WoW needs to come up with their own like DBM that has call outs, and whether it's, you know, like I like the idea of like, you know, if your alliance, Anduin is the one telling you like, hey, like dodge these, or, you know, soak this, right, but like, because you're right, I mean, at the end of the day, and maybe that allows them to add like a little bit more mechanics into LFR, because right now LFR is like basically zero mechanics. You just go in and slap something and then you call it a day. Like there is some mechanics, but like at the end of the day, if everyone dies from them and you have one like eye level 620 tank, he's just gonna kill the boss by himself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know if that really helps anybody, right? Like
it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Right. No.
And the idea, by the way, the idea would be that the mechanics for the tutorial raid, the story mode raid, whatever, would be like so simple, right? Like, you know, that you have you have like two things you have to do in that fight, and you just know to do those things, right?
Yeah, and like personally,
and again, the NPC is probably calling it out, right? The fake raid leaders. Yeah.
And like honestly, and this is a hot take, I think they would benefit from just doing a normal raid, like literally just taking normal raid and lowering the boss health a little bit and just making the timing on actions longer. So like you have like, you know, instead of a soak taking like, oh, like this soak goes out, you have like 4 seconds to soak it with your team. Just make it like 8. And that way people are like, oh, like I have to soak. What does that mean? Oh, Anduin's telling me, oh, I got to stand next to this guy, soak in 3, done. Right. And I think that just gives people more of a general, like, and maybe not all the mechanics from normal, but like, I feel like that'd be so much, I don't know.
No, maybe I'm just going I think you're very correct on that. We got to move on though to our next, next question. So, we had a question come in on Discord. So if you're not on Discord, you can find a link in the description below. And so we have a channel called Questions for the Pod, where you can ask your questions to the podcast. So we have a question coming in from Towwine, which, by the way, Tow has been a long time supporter of the community, an amazing guy. And he asks, how important are flasks, like the ones that last an hour or more? Also, does anyone mess with gear enchantments? Curious minds want to know. Chicken, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I personally, so when it comes to flasks and kind of gear enchantment and all that stuff, I kind of break it down into 3 categories. So you have your, and this is all for, well, okay, technically there's 4 categories. You have gear enchantment, you have flasks and files, you have weapon enhancement, and then you have your in battle kind of like, you know, potions and that kind of stuff. There is a difference between, and you can kind of throw gems in there a little bit, but I don't tend to mess with gems too much, just because if you have a gem slot, find a gem that works great with your character and throw it in there, right? So personally, when it comes down to those 4 categories, there's a couple gear enchantments that you should really worry about. I think legs is a big one. For like 1,000 gold, you can get an extra like 1,000 strength and 1,000 stamina on your character, which is, I mean, a pretty big deal. And you got ring enchantments, getting an extra 20 of a second or 200 of a secondary. Those are pretty big, but for the most part, the other ones are kind of hit or miss. I don't know if you follow much of that swag. I mean, some avoidance is nice, some speed, but they're pretty like tertiary at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, every one's a little bit different. I would also say the ones that give you the better stats are generally the more expensive enchantments, right?
Yeah,
versus the ones that are a little goofier.
You'd be pretty surprised. The leg enchantments are about 1,000 gold a piece, and it gets you 1,000 strength, which is pretty. I mean,
yeah. Well, if we're talking about cost for reward, then yeah. But we're just saying cost for cost, right?
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
But what I would say too, to answer your question, Tao, it all depends on the content you're doing.
Okay. Yeah, right? That's pretty fair.
If you're just out exploring the world.
Oh yeah.
Who cares, right? Like, go explore. You're fine. You're gonna be fine. If you are trying to push delves, you're probably fine. I don't know if there's anything delves that really crazy need it, but you're probably fine. If you're doing Mythic Plus or Raid and you feel very comfortable, like you're not struggling at all, it's simple. You guys are getting easy kills. You're not having a lot of trouble. Yeah, then you're fine. If that's the gameplay you're doing, totally fine. I wouldn't worry about it. If you're doing gameplay, though, that you're like, I am feeling stuck, I'm trying to push harder and further than I would normally feel comfortable doing. I'm really stretching myself right now, getting out of my comfort zone. And you need to milk every bit of damage, every bit of healing, whatever it is. You got to get as much of it out. That's where enchantments become really important. That's where flasks become really important. Chicken and I are raiding right now. Granted, it's just heroic. But we're still dropping a good amount of gold every week, making sure that we have flasks.
Yep.
Making sure that our gear is enchanted, making sure that we have like feasts to put out, so that we all have the food buff every single pull. There does come an extent, like to an extent, right? Like I'm not using augment runes right now. I have a couple on one of my alts has a few from doing some dungeons, but. The cost to reward for that is just so high that I can't justify.
Oh yeah, that's way too high. Yeah, and you elaborated a lot better on that than I am. I'm basically just giving general information. And to your point, you're right. If you're just doing like in-game content or like world content, like you don't need any of this. And delves is like, like if you want to push like the top delves like once just for the achievements, and they're definitely helpful.
Yeah.
But when you start getting into M plus and raid and stuff, you're gonna want to look into this. And personally, the one that I would look into the most is the flasks and the files, because they last an hour. This expansion, Dragonflight, it was only 30 minutes, which is a huge improvement.
Yeah, files I think are 30 minutes. Flasks are an hour.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe it was because Dragonflight
only used files.
Dragonflight.
Yeah, and now we're back to flasks. Files were just a Dragonflight thing. They were not a thing before Dragonflight.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
Interesting. Anyways, your flask lasts an hour, and like you're talking like anywhere from 2,500 to 3,200 secondary stat, and they're like rarity 2 is like 200 gold. I mean, I'd keep a couple in your bag as secondaries. That way, if maybe you are getting into a dungeon and you're really just like struggling, you're like, hey, I'm gonna pop this real quick, and they last through death, so you don't really have to worry about them going away from dying. But that could be literally between life or death. Like that little bit of stat can really help you stay alive a little longer. So yeah, I mean, Swag's right. It comes down to your content that you're running, basically.
Yeah, I also my alternative, I would actually say I think enchantments are more important than flasks.
Yes.
in terms of order.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Because, and my reason for saying that is because enchantments last, whereas flasks last an hour, right? So you're getting more overall return long term because you have that permanently on your armor. The trade-off, though, is depends on what your armor is, right? Right now, all of my gear is either mythic or myth track gear or heroic track gear. Or hero, right? Myth and hero. Even on my hero gear, I'm not really like it takes me a minute before I actually can replace it with a piece of myth track. Right now I'm getting one piece of myth track every week from my vault. So I'm not very quickly replacing my hero gear. So I have no problem dropping a few $1,000s to enchant a piece of armor.
$1,000. Whoa.
Not $1,000. Few thousand gold. Change. A little change here. That's only like $10 or not even 10. That's like
$1.
That's like $8. Right. I don't mind dropping a couple thousand gold on enchant for a piece of gear that I'm probably gonna have for another month, maybe. Right. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll replace it before then. Even if I replace it next week, I'm raiding. I want to make sure I'm juicing every little bit to get these bosses down. And because the expectations that all of our raiders are juicing to get these bosses down so that we're all doing it together. What I would say, though, Tao, if you're raiding with us this Friday with our community raid night, I wouldn't worry about it.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. I would not be concerned, though. I would just show up because we're raiding normal. It's a learner's night. It's beginner's night. We're not stressing. We're not making it difficult. So in that case, right, even then, if that's how you like to raid, I probably still wouldn't be worried about it. It's up to you. If you want it and you got the gold, buy it. I'd probably do enchants over flasks, unless you're looking at your gear and you're like, oh no, I'll replace my gear really fast. Then yeah, maybe just do some flasks instead. I mean, do both though. If you can do both, and feasts. Get that food buff too. Do it all. I don't know.
Yeah, the feasts are good, and your in battle potions are pretty good.
Food. It doesn't have to always be a feast. I'm just a weirdo.
Oh my goodness.
That's
fair.
Okay, and we have a second question coming in from Xylan on Discord, and kind of to our early conversation. But how do you put together an M+ group for your own beginner key? What do you look for? Tips, tricks, watch outs. Yeah, that's a very good question.
Don't take a blood DK.
No, I'm the blood DK. What I would say, though, when it comes to your own beginner key, the best thing you can do is to start learning the mechanics of a dungeon. Do some M0s, learn those mechanics, and then list your key. And as you list the key, this is going to be really shallow. I'm going to give you some really shallow advice, and people are going to hate this advice, but it's good advice. It is good advice. As people sign up, look at their rating, look at their eye level, right? And when you hover over them, I don't know if this is an add-on I have or if it's by default, but when I hover over them, it shows me the best run they have for that dungeon and best run they have overall. So I'm yawning. It's late tonight. Overall for any dungeon. And I will take whoever looks the absolute best to me. There are some meta specs. There are some specs that are better than others right now. But if you're saying, hey, I want to put together an M+ for your own beginner key, right? If we're talking low keys, you're fine. Meta specs really don't matter too much until you're hitting that 10+ range. Even at the 10s, right? Everybody's viable. There's some things that bring benefits, but everybody's viable. So I wouldn't worry too much about what is the flavor of the month for classes. I would mostly be focused on what are people achieving individually right now and pull the best. And the reason why people would say they don't like that advice or that's bad advice is because people do get annoyed when they sign up for a key and they don't get picked, even though their gear is good enough for the key, but they don't get picked because somebody who's way over geared and has way too much rating gets invited to the key instead. But remember this. It's your key and you want to succeed. You don't owe anybody else charity. You don't have to be nice. Grab the people who are going to make your life as easy as possible and help push your key up higher. Dungeons are group content. They take a team. It takes a team to win and an individual to lose.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said there, outside of maybe one point, and maybe it was just because I misunderstood you.
Yeah.
But so it's good to maybe bring this up. I would do that for everything, maybe other than a 2. And the only reason I say that is because a 2, if you are pretty decently geared, a 2 should be pretty easy. I don't want to say regardless of who you take, but a 2 should be rather easy. If I'm not saying you shouldn't just, I'm basically what I'm saying is for like a super low key, like a 2 or maybe even a 3, if not everyone meets that criteria, it's fine. But when you're getting up into like the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 range, then yeah, everything Swag said is very true.
Yeah. And by the way,
basically everything.
My advice is relative.
Your discretion.
My advice is relative, right?
Yeah.
So if you're posting a 2 and somebody's queuing up and they have no rating, which by the way happens a lot for 2s, because that is your intro key. Until you do your first key, you don't get any rating at all, right? So
yeah, right.
You can get a lot. You will get people signed with 0 rating, and that's fine. And you can take them again, as Chicken said. 2s are your intro. Now, granted, 2s are harder than intro keys used to be like a year ago.
Yes.
So there's they're not quite that easy anymore as they once were. However, they are still your entry into Mythic Plus. But what I would say is it's all relative. So if you have somebody signing up who has 0 rating and someone else signs up and they have 600 rating.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, like there's no reason to take the 0 rating over the 600 rating. No. Unless the 0 rating guy's coming in and his eye level is like busted good because he's been raiding and doing like delves, right? Maybe he has been hiding away in delves for like months, right?
Dude.
And so he got all his like 616 gear and like crested it up. I don't even know how he would get crests though without doing M+.
Heroic raid, I guess.
And if he's doing heroic raid, he's got to be doing M+. So this is a stupid scenario. But let's just say, right, somebody queues up and they're just... All I would say is, as you post the queue, take the best of the best. You don't have to take the first people to sign up. A good example of this, I was running raid with a friend of mine in the guild. They're fantastic. I think they're a sweeter person than I am. If she's listening right now, she knows I have the most respect for her, but she is a lot sweeter than I am as a person. And so we were queuing up to run one of my keys, but she was the party lead. And I'm fairly sure she just grabbed the first 3 people, the first 3 DPS that queued up. I was like, here we go. We got DPS. Let's go. Which, to be fair, not a lot of people queue up for 9s. So it makes sense, right? Because at that point, why not queue for an 8 or a 10? 10 gets you better vault. 8 at least gets you gilded crests. 9 has no benefit over the 2. And so I understand partly why you would just grab the first 3. But man, we couldn't even get the first boss down, right? And so, never be afraid to like let your invite list marinate a little bit, right? When you post your key, let it marinate. Let a few people queue up. You don't have to take the first ones that queue up. You don't owe anybody an invite. And if they whisper you and they're like, "I'm a 2.7K main," okay, cool. I guess.
Cool.
I mean, in the +2, that's helpful because that means they know dungeons pretty well, so they'll probably be fine.
Yeah, that's fair.
But there does come a point where like you also need gear. you need to be able to survive. So, all of that to say, the best thing you can do is to go that route. I also wouldn't be afraid to just tell people, especially if it's like a +2. I wouldn't be afraid to tell people like, "Hey, I want to do some keys, but I'm nervous. This is like my first key. Thanks for running with me." Yeah, that's one. And then the last thing I would say on the subject before we maybe wrap up the podcast, having community is important. At the beginning, we were talking about M+, and I was saying that like as I run keys, as I meet people who are good, who I enjoy doing keys with, I usually keep a touch point with them and like reach out in the future to ask about doing more keys together. And that's where I find I have the most fun and I'm the most successful in keys. If you're looking to get into keys for the first time in +2s and stuff, that doesn't work as well because nobody's really making groups to do +2s long term. However, I think finding a guild, finding a community that is willing to do dungeons together and run with you and be a part of the process, I think that's super helpful. If you're struggling to find a guild that can do that, we also have the Discord. There's again link. I've said this so many times. Link in the description. And we would be happy to run keys with you. I know when I'm streaming a lot, I'll do keys, and if you see me doing keys while streaming, ask me to run your key, and I'm usually pretty happy to do that. I never complain. I enjoy being able to bring our viewers onto the stream to run a key and do some not coaching, but just help people through their content.
Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. No. I do agree with that. And you were saying earlier there is the add-on Raider.io. If you can get that for your game, that is what tells you what people's rating is. It tells you their best run, how many time runs they have for a specific set of keys, and all that kind of stuff.
I don't even know if I have the Raider.io add-on. I will say though, it does by default. No, they do now tell you rating, and eye level in the.
Oh, they do. By
default, it now does. Right, you don't need the add-on for that anymore. But
yeah,
I do think that's everything, Chick. I know we're getting close to. I think we might beat last week's episode. Oops. We're gonna try and better plan these podcasts in the future. But everybody, thank you so much for listening. We've talked about Discord. We've talked about leaving your comments. Give us a review if you have a chance, and we will see you next week with a special guest.
Yes, we will.